It is April 1st, and we are officially 24 days away from the 2024 NFL Draft. I have some thoughts on the Cleveland Browns, and we're going to talk about them now. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound LGB on the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, and I appreciate all of you who make Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing. Join the everyday crowd. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Want to appreciate everybody. I've reached out, birthday over the weekend on Saturday. The number 50 is just a number. It's all about how you view yourself. It's all about how you live your life. Numbers are numbers. It all comes down to how you do what you do. Hope everybody had a great Easter Sunday. Family, food, a little downtime, but we are now 24 days away from the NFL draft. And the more I dig into this and the more I look at it, for the Cleveland Browns, whose first selection is at pick 54, you're looking for impact. You want somebody that, can jump right in, hopefully to a rotation in a positional room and give you something. And now looking at positions in areas where the Browns look like they are going to draft, be interested in this 2024 class. Would you like a developmental guard for the future? Sure. Are you possibly looking for another offensive tackle to compete for that fourth tackle spot? Certainly. Linebacker, certainly something the Browns could have interest in, as they're going to try to reset the room there financially when JOK sometime between now and the summer gets his well-deserved contract extension. Secondary, Browns are deep, 5 safeties on the roster already. Cornerback room, I don't know how it would become a pressing need unless the Cleveland Browns did, in fact, trade Greg Newsome, which I just don't see, where the return is. If, Greg is a guy who plays significant snaps for this team, has the ability to be a starter on the outside if, God forbid, something happens to Martin Emerson or Denzel Ward. I don't know what getting maybe a pick from 60 to possibly 100 brings the Browns, because it creates another need. So just keep Greg Newsome. And, next year you'll have a lot more draft allocation and just address it that way. But for the Browns to stay at 54, my honest belief is it's either a defensive lineman or it's going to be an offensive skill position. I don't see a way it works any other way. They would like to get some impact out of whoever it is that they draft at 54. If it is a fourth guard, you're not getting that impact. I mean, it would be the worst possible scenario if that rookie plays significant reps in 2024. Cornerback, I just stated why the reasons are there. Safety as well. And even if you wanted to say linebacker, and look, I'm more than okay to see the Devin Bush experiment unfold. So you all know Devin was a big draft crush of mine back in 2019. Obviously ties to the team with his father being a former Cleveland Brown. But for me, the question would be is, that middle linebacker, the Mike spot for the Browns, and I've said this several times and I'll continue to say it, it's the first player off the field. So, how much impact are you going to get from pick 54 if it is a Mike linebacker, if he does, in fact, beat out Devin Bush when you go to nickel, when you go to dime? He'll be the first player off the field. JOK is the guy who's not coming off the field ever. So you're not going to get an every down player at 54 at the linebacker position, unless, of course, something goes drastically wrong. Now we look at the defensive tackle room. And of course, Jefferson was signed. You brought back Mo Hurst. You brought back Shelby Harris. You have Dalvin Tomlinson. Siaki Ika is going into year 2 of his career here with the Cleveland Browns. Basically an incomplete on year 1. He was late. Was hurt in the summer, late getting to being able to play. Was not elevated till late in the season when the Browns either A, had injuries or, basically rested on their laurels in week 18 against the Cincinnati Bengals. So you're telling me that, bringing in a defensive tackle and, to compete against Siaki Ika, and maybe the experiment was wrong. And the Browns defense likes gap penetrators. Siaki Ika is not going to come in and do some of the dirty work that Dalvin Tomlinson is doing. He's not going to take that role. So if you're telling me I take a defensive tackle at 54 and it comes down to, oh no, what do we do? And I get a lot of this, well, what are you going to do with Siaki Ika? I think I could probably still move Siaki Ika for some sort of pick as he's only in year 2. That's not going to hold up if I can get a player with impact that can play on the interior at selection 54. As we talked about the growth of the Cleveland Browns roster, and yes, they've always been loyal to their rookies, and these guys have almost stayed for the entirety of their rookie contracts. I'm not sure the Browns roster is in that type of position right now anymore. It's, you either, you're not going to be, secured of a roster spot just because, you were drafted top 100 a year ago. It's time to contribute, or somebody else will do the contributing for you. Same thing would apply at defensive end. Isiah McGuire, it was difficult for him to get playing time last year until some injuries, and the guys missed time for Isiah McGuire. The Browns with, most likely keeping 5 at defensive end, most likely keeping 5 at defensive tackle. You're either dressing 4 defensive tackles each week, or you're only dressing 4 edges this week. The number could manipulate from 5 defensive tackles to 4 edges, or 5 edges to 4 defensive tackles. So a guy like Isiah McGuire certainly, had a moment last year, had his first career sack. But, if your thought process is whoever is, the 5th guy in either the defensive tackle room or in the edge room, those guys aren't worthy of having to compete for the spot. I simply just completely disagree with you. Now, the skill positions, these guys will get on the field. If you can draft a running back, the contract that was given to Dante Foreman does not suggest he is a lock for the roster in 2024. You still have your uncertainties with Nick Chubb. If there's a running back in this class that you love at 54, and most likely you can take the top running back that the Browns have on the board at 54. Don't confuse yourself with that. So the Browns could go that route, certainly at 54. Tight end, I'm just not sure there's a tight end that's going to warrant a selection at 54 that can give the Browns some immediate impact. Tight end doesn't, just come in right away and contribute, but the Browns certainly should be in the tight end market. Wide receiver, I know Cedric Tillman is here. Certainly, obviously, David Bell is still here. But now you're a little bit better for 2025 with Jerry Jeudy under contract, but Moore, Cooper, still free agents slated as of this moment for 2025. You need to look at that wide receiver market. It's a deep class. You can certainly get a solid return of investment at selection 54. We're going to go a little bit more in depth here. We're going to start talking about obviously some name and positional needs here for the Browns at 54 in the defensive tackle, defensive line room. Jeff Floyd, your latest Locked On Browns continues. Nobody go anywhere. Your sports calendar is loaded right now, and FanDuel's making it even more exciting to get in on the action, because right now new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet on the remainder of the tourney, MLB, NBA, NHL, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet a big one. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Jeff Lloyd, your latest Locked On Browns continues. As always, I thank you all who make Locked On Browns your first listen every day. The everyday crowd, you guys are amazing, and I appreciate you all so much. Join the everyday crowd, subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It's always free, wherever you get your podcast. Talking some of the scenarios here for the Cleveland Browns at selection 54. I truly believe at this point it is going to be a position of impact, either defensive line, tackle, or edge, or offensive skill position. We're not chasing a 4th tackle with this first pick. We're not chasing a 4th guard, a 6th safety, a 6th corner. There are plenty positional rooms where the Browns are deep. And You just want one where you know that there is a rotation. There's no rotation at guard. There's no rotation at tackle. And, any other position, secondary wise, maybe even linebacker wise, you're chasing either a linebacker that is not going to play a ton because the goal would be to get him off the field as quickly as possible, or a secondary player who you just think is going to come in and jump in front of a Thornhill, a Delpit, a McLeod, or a corner that's going to jump in front of Newsome, obviously Emerson, Denzel Ward. It's just not going to happen. It's D tackle, it's D end, or it's offensive skill. Big if, obviously, if the Browns stay at selection 54. Now you look at the interior, and there are some names that certainly appeal. And obviously, I've gone through this group before, and we're going to continue to go through this group as we get closer and closer to April 25th, technically April 26th for your Brownies before they make their first selection. Rook Hororo, defensive tackle out of Clemson. He kind of fits more of the size profile that the Browns have been going on. Ika was the one that kind of broke the norm here as far as what they look for paired to Jim Schwartz. All of these guys kind of 295, 300. Obviously, Dalvin Tomlinson's a little bigger, about north of 310, depending on what Dalvin ate last week. But gap penetrator, strong at the point of attack. He tested really well athletically. Somebody the Browns certainly could have interest in and could be available for the Browns at 54. I'm not going to get off the Mike Hall Jr. bandwagon. You guys all know, you have a history of following Mike's career in high school. Good personal friend, Pete Smith, part of the coaching staff at Strongville, where, of course, Mike went. He tested ridiculously well. 6'2" and change, came in just under 300 pounds at the Ohio State Pro Day, ran well, jumped well. You see, the speed, you see the athleticism. This is something that Mike Hall had going all the way back, obviously, to high school. Now, Hall can give you some of that pass rushing that you're looking for, a la Maurice Hurst, gives you maybe a more future presence in that defensive tackle room. If you want to say, hey, it wasn't a long, illustrious, stat-filled career at Columbus for Mike Hall Jr., I get it. I do. That's a case to be made, certainly. Of the entire profile for Mike Hall Jr., the production in his time in Columbus would be certainly something that would be a little bit lacking. But age matches up, athleticism matches up, and the tape that you do have of Mike Hall at his time at Ohio State, really solid. Chris Jenkins, same type of guy, maybe out of Michigan, obviously a legacy player. His father, his uncle, longtime NFL defensive tackles and quality players in their time in the NFL. Chris, I think people thought he was going to test a little bit more elite than he did. Obviously, that was not the case, but Chris Jenkins still a solid option here. And if you're telling me if it's a player like, Rook, or it's a player like Mike Hall Jr., or it's a player like Chris Jenkins, and they're competing against Siaki Ika, yeah, you can see the case where maybe Siaki Ika is a one-and-done player in his time with the Cleveland Browns. Braden Fisk, Florida State, was obviously a gem from the NFL Combine. His testing was through the roof. It's just not a player the Browns are going to commit to due to his age. Hopefully he finds his way, way out of the AFC North. Two other players I really enjoy on tape. Dwayne Carter. Now, Dwayne Carter, he's just a bully. I mean, just physical, lunch pail guy. Gets in, gets his nose dirty, will take on the double team. He does have decent production as far as making plays at the line of scrimmage, behind the line of scrimmage at Duke. Carter's had a nice run his final year at Duke. His draft lead up here to the 2024 draft. A player I'm kind of impressed with. Mason Smith out of LSU. Now, tested phenomenal. Absolutely through the charts, one of the best testing defensive tackles throughout the entire draft process. Tape at LSU is good, right around 300 pounds. He is quick, he is strong, he is agile, all things that Siaki Ika aren't. I'm not pointing out Siaki Ika, but I'm just saying the Browns want depth. The Browns are going to need some longevity in that room. Shelby Harris's contract is 2 years. Technically, it's one. Maurice Hurst back on the 1 year deal. Of course, Jefferson here on the 1 year deal. Mason Smith can play the run. That's one thing you're kind of going to need here. Not really a Maurice Hurst strong point, and that's okay. Certainly not a strong point for Jefferson. Shelby Harris pretty solid at it. But who's going to be that third defensive tackle that's going to play in base situations, that would play in short yardage situations if need be? Mason Smith, certainly a guy to look for to fill that role. Now we switch it up, and we kind of talk here a little bit about edge players. And again, maybe you're competing against, of course, Isiah McGuire. We know the role that Miles has. We know the roles that Darius is going to have. We know the role that Ogbenaya Ankaragwa was going to have. And Alex Wright, very well, in my opinion, could end up 2024 as the second best defensive and on the Cleveland Browns roster. I think he made major strides in year 2. This was always going to be a player that was going to be it was going to be a marathon. It wasn't necessarily going to be a sprint for Alex Wright coming out of UAB. Kind of just did whatever they asked him to. There was never an opportunity for Alex Wright to specialize on just being that outside pass rusher that he is now in the NFL. Browns certainly kick him inside due to his length. He's a very, very smart player, understands passing angles. If he's not going to get home to the quarterback, and not getting an opportunity to get a hit on the quarterback, he does his best to close down the passing lanes and obviously make it more difficult for the quarterback to succeed. I'm fine with Alex Wright, but if you want to say that there is going to be competition for Isiah McGuire, and again, it's not a knock on any of these guys. The Browns are going to have to draft some players. So that's going to affect some guys in their current standing on this roster. So you're either going to fight for it. Unfortunately, something will happen that's going to open up an extra opening for a defensive lineman. We all don't hope for that, but certainly things to look for. Darius Robinson out of Missouri, bigger, longer defensive end, not necessarily. I think he's kind of more cut out for obviously to be the 3-4 defensive end for these odd front teams, not necessarily something the Browns are looking for. Isiah Isaac, good athlete out of Penn State. He can come in tad bit undersized, but gives maybe Browns something they don't. Somebody more like Agbanaya Okoronkwo, a little bit lighter, smaller end with good quickness. Of course, Chris Braswell from Alabama would be a lovely fit as well. Braden Trice from Washington, no athletic testing to this point. I really like Braden Trice's tape. I don't think technically, as far as being a run defender, he is sound enough in his assignments. It's going to be something the Cleveland Browns like. We've done this for years. The everydayers know the Browns kind of like that lunchbox guy to go next to Miles, the guy who's going to get the job done. Marshawn Nealon from Western Michigan is certainly an interesting guy for me, because with Breland, I think the best is yet to come. Very similar to Alex Wright at UAB, kind of just did what the team asked him and wasn't necessarily allowed to have his own personal growth, as far as it was more, him doing what he needed to do for team success. Jonah Ellis out of Utah is a guy that's maybe now starting to get talked about a little bit more. Fun player. Very, very, sound in what he does now. He did test well athletically. So it's interesting what you can do here for the Browns at the defensive line position. I really, really value and appreciate the work that has been done here by Andrew Berry and the staff to this point. They understood how much of a difference they made in 2023, finally getting that interior correct, which allowed for the outside guys to perform like they did. Miles, of course, leading to Defensive Player of the Year. Many games where Miles just could not be matched because the team's offensive line, the team's the opponent's scheme was just, we can't commit 3 players to Myles Garrett every down. We can't commit 4 players and or 3 players and a chip to Myles Garrett. These other guys are good. These other guys are capable of getting it done. I can't get my quarterback killed. That is what the Browns have built within this defensive line. And by bringing back Sedarius, by bringing back Shelby Harris, by bringing back Mo Hurst, by bringing in Quentin Jefferson, this defensive line right now, and of course with the emergence of Alex Wright, this defensive line now should be better in 2024 than it was in 2023, which is a scary, scary thought for the Cleveland Browns opponents heading into the 2024 season. We're going to flip it up here. We're going to talk some skilled players that may fit the Browns' needs at 54. Jeff Lloyd, your latest Locked On Browns, continues on. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's the first thing you do if you had an extra hour in your day? You can take that run you've always been talking about. Would you do something for yourself? Would you give you more time to do one more thing for your wife, your kids, whatever? A lot of us spend our lives wishing we had more time. Question is, time for what? If time was unlimited, how would you use it? The best way to squeeze that special thing in your schedule is to know what's important to you and make it a priority. Therapy can help you find what matters to you so you can do more of it. For me, I've got a lot on my plate, and I don't necessarily take the time I need for myself. So through therapy, it teaches me, hey, it's okay if I want to go just sit down, gather my thoughts for 25 minutes, half an hour. I just want to have lunch in a quiet place and just be by myself. If you're thinking or starting therapy, you should probably give BetterHelp a try. It's done entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. As always, I appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. Your host, Jeff Lloyd, the everyday crowd. You're a bunch of filthy animals, but you're my filthy animals. I love you all to death. Join the filthy animals by becoming it every day or subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available, always free, wherever you get your podcasts. We've been talking about the possibility of the Cleveland Browns and what to necessarily do here at pick 54, in my opinion, is going to come down to a defensive lineman or an offensive skill position. This is the best bang for the buck. This is the best possibility to get impact out of that selection 54, as the Browns will now have their third NFL draft in a row without a first-round pick, which, of course, was all part of the Deshaun Watson trade. And the Browns certainly need that trade to start paying dividends if they want to go where they think they are capable of going in 2024. Now, when I say offensive skill positions, obviously running back, obviously wide receiver, obviously tight end. Although tight end, I don't know how it works, but we'll start at the running back position. You can probably get whoever the Cleveland Browns think is the best running back in this class. That player can probably be drafted with pick 54. Trey Benson out of Florida State. I'll continue going back to this player. Unique player, can help in the passing game. Don't necessarily need that so much with the signing of Nyheim Hines. Obviously, Jerome Ford here. Dante Foreman, not something he does or does well. And the money, of course, on Dante Foreman's contract says that Dante Foreman is not necessarily a roster lock for 2024. All of this is understanding that we have no idea what Nick Chubb is able to give this franchise this upcoming season. So you got to be ready to go, whether it's a little bit of Nick, a lot of Nick, maybe a tiny sliver of Nick. The Browns have to make the concession to have that running back room ready. And then we'll find out where the chips are going to fall as far as what Nick Chubb can give this franchise in 2024. Trey Benson ran sub 4.4 at the combine. Again, something that surprised me after watching him all the last couple of years of Florida State. Smooth, clean. He accelerates through contact, so those 3-yard runs become 4.5-yard runs, become 5-yard runs. He's got good wiggle. He's got good vision. He's able to bounce it outside with ease. He's strong with a stiff arm. Trey Benson put together a bunch of highlight runs in his 2 years in Tallahassee. He would be a great pick as the Browns look for somebody that can be a huge part of this running back room in 2024, but also could be a key component to what the future of the Cleveland Browns running back room is going forward. Braylon Allen, I'm not going to get away from the Braylon Allen, Audric Estime type of guys. They are closer backs. They are big backs. They force missed tackles. Guys bounce off of them. Braylon Allen, just a pup, won't turn 21 until January of 2025. There's a lot of room to work with him. There's still a lot of room for Braylon Allen to grow as a player as he gets into a more complex system in the NFL after leaving Wisconsin. Audric Estime, I'm not leaving this train. I'm not. And, obviously a lot of people felt he tested better at the Notre Dame Pro Day than he did necessarily at the Combine. But he is a guy that I am just going to look at the tape and I'm going to look at the production, and I'm just not going to go any further than that. Production, 1,000 yards, 17 touchdowns this past season for the Fighting Irish. New York kid, did prep school in Jersey, went out to Notre Dame, put together a solid career there. I really think this type of guy, at about 233, you get him to play a little bit more at 230. You have backs that can loosen up the defense, and Nyheim Hines, Jerome Ford. These guys can loosen up the defense, and you can have somebody come in and do the Kareem Hunt role from 2023, but do it better, be quicker, and just be faster to the hole. And that's certainly something that Estime can give you, certainly something that Allen can give you. What Kareem Hunt did last year was a godsend for the Cleveland Browns, but they need somebody else to be able to come in and do it, and probably do it a little bit better. Wide receiver, it's a question of what the Browns think they need. Do you want a straight vertical threat? Troy Franklin. Do you want a guy that can kind of give you a little bit of everything, maybe a little Deebo Samuel type of influence to your offense? Malachi Corley, certainly out of Western Kentucky. Jalen Polk, it just seems Jalen Polk is just a guy that not a lot of people maybe appreciate. I think Jalen Polk somehow turns into a 50 reception plus receiver in the NFL. He can play some inside, he can play some outside. He was one of those guys for Washington, did it all. Also, you go back to Washington, one of my favorite wide receivers in this class, Jalen McMillan, was great as a sophomore. sophomore, missed a lot of time as a junior. Certainly a guy that can contribute on the inside. He played a majority of the slot for the Washington Huskies, did it well. Browns do not have somebody that really excels in the slot, guys who can do things in the slot. And I'm not talking just necessarily vertical patterns out of the slot. Some of the slip screens, some of the smoke screens, that type of stuff. Jalen McMillan is certainly capable of that. The tight end position, I just don't know what to do. Ben Sinnott, Kansas State, is a nice player. I'm not sure you're drafting him at 54. I'm not sure you're going to get the return of the investment. Theo Johnson, I like. Great raw athlete. There has to be a lot of football that has to be worked into, of course, into Theo Johnson's game for him to be successful in the NFL. Good player, great athlete. The one that really stands out to me is Jaheim Bell out of Florida State. There were times he played running back at South Carolina. There were times he played, he played direct snap, lined up at the quarterback position for Florida State. Played some fullback looks, played some H-back looks, played some tight end looks, played some outside wide receiver looks, played some slot wide receiver looks. Jaheim Bell is somebody that just comes in with a lot of versatility. Versatility is a skill in the NFL. If you can do a lot of things, they can find a way to use you, not to mention the way these new kickoff rules, he could be an asset probably on kickoff return and certainly an asset covering kicks as well. I'm Jeff Lloyd, your host here at Locked On Browns. We're about 24 days away from the 2024 NFL Draft. Browns have a ton of possibilities. If they make any more moves, that certainly can change the preference or order of what the possibilities could be or how they're going to handle pick 54 in the NFL Draft. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing. Just subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. You got all the content coming your way. My life is eased up here a lot, so you're going to get a bunch from me as I now have the flexibility to record as I need to and as I want to. Show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on the LOB. Let's go Browns.